All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is Mr. Rodgers. Mr. Rodge is an up-and-coming author and speaker on student success and mindset. Mr. Rodge has served his country and communities as an Army veteran and as a public school educator. On stage, he shares the insights he's gained through those diverse experiences in a fun and engaging manner. Mills has authored book titles Success is a Process, Not an Event, and You Can Win Being You, which was written with the intent of providing insight into the often rocky road of finding our purpose, reaching our goals, and living our dreams. Welcome to the show, Mr. Rodge.
Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you here. You've been doing a lot of good all your life, but I'm excited to dig into your story because you're the kind of people that we want youth looking up to, the way that you've served and have lived your life. So let's start back at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, some of those experiences that were formative for you.
Definitely. And, one thing about my childhood, that's one of the things I like to share with kids. So I would say the first 10 years of my childhood were pretty awesome. I'll be honest. It was pretty awesome. My mom was a teacher. My dad was he was in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, they had me, only child. Got an opportunity to travel the world. I lived overseas a couple of times. And when I was in the United States, I lived on military bases. And again, it was pretty awesome. I went to some great schools and lived in some really good communities. And so it was a lot of fun. But unfortunately, and this is something that a lot of kids experience, my parents went their separate ways. They started having some problems, and it pretty much got to a point where I was just like, man, I just wish they would just kind of split. And so, uh, you know, unfortunately, they did split, but in a way, I was kind of relieved because of all the problems they were having. And we moved back to my mom's hometown in Louisiana. And it was like a big culture shock for me because, again, like I mentioned, first 10 years of my life or so, I was living on these military bases and it was really cool, very diverse populations. Then moving back to Louisiana, especially small town in Louisiana, very poor town, it was very, it was segregated and it was just a lot different than what I had experienced. Of course, I made it,
Mm-hmm.
I survived and everything, but it was a unique experience. At the same time, though, it gave me insights to see, how people live in different places, and it's really helped me as an adult to be able to relate to a lot of people.
Right.
And so that kind of summarizes my childhood for the most part. I went to high school, graduated in the top 15% of my class, went on to college.
Right. Now you have a unique background that most kids can't relate to as far as the military background and moving around a lot. How has your military upbringing and moving around prepared you for later in your life?
Good question. I think it made me able to relate better to people because I lived amongst diverse populations. I lived in different places. And so, for example, like here in San Antonio, as a teacher, I've worked with kids and, I'll share certain things with them. Like, yeah, when I lived in such and such place, they didn't have this type of food like y'all have in San Antonio. And people will be like, huh? What? What do you mean? And so, just that right there, that lets me know that, when you're just located in one place, when you haven't really moved around, I'm not going to say you're not as open-minded, but you just haven't experienced a lot of different things. And so, having moved around a lot with, growing up, it helped me with just being flexible and being relatable to kids and adults.
Right. Well, and another benefit from your upbringing is I'm sure that more than a normal kid, you had a lot of pride in your father's military service and what he was doing for our country. And I'm sure that was influential in your own service. Did you join the military straight from high school, or what was that transition like for you?
That's another interesting story. No, I didn't join straight from high school. I went to college right after high school, and I ended up graduating from college and went into the job world and everything. But something just wasn't quite right. Something just wasn't quite right with what I was doing. I wasn't happy, and I kind of looked back on my dad's service and I thought about the good times at least. And I'm like, man, I kind of missed that. And I want that for my own family because, by the time I finished college, I was, I had a family, young family myself.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, well, maybe I can join the military. It gives you some stability and it gives you training and all that other good stuff. And so that's some of the reasons why I joined. Just reflecting back on the great experiences I had, and I wanted to, provide that for my family.
That's great. Well, thank you so
Mhm.
much for your service. What are
Oh, you're
some of
welcome.
the lessons you learned while you were in the military and serving?
Oh, good one right there. And again, these are things I share with kids. I'll be honest. Before I joined the military, I was a quitter. Of course, I didn't realize it at the time,
Hmm.
but now that I can reflect upon it, yeah, I was a quitter. And the reason I say that is because, you might be saying, well, hey, you graduated in the top 15% of your class. How could you be a quitter? You weren't a loser, you weren't a quitter. Well, here's the thing. Whenever things got tough, I would always go in a different direction. In high school, whether it was sports or classes, I was changing direction. I quit sports, or maybe I would, get another schedule, as far as, dropping a class off my schedule, replacing it with something that was a little easier. Same thing with college. I changed my major several times when I went to college. And it was because I didn't have that resilience in me to push through the tough times. And so going in the military, going to basic training, it wasn't convenient to quit. I guess you can quit, you can do whatever you want, but they
Right.
weren't going to make it easy for you to quit. They weren't going to make it convenient for you to quit. All those other situations, it was convenient for me to go in a different direction. Basic training, it wasn't. And so that was the main lesson I learned right there. I had to push through some things that I was struggling with initially. Like, and well, I'll tell you, it was marksmanship. I
Hmm.
couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And so I struggled a lot with marksmanship and basic training. But then, because I couldn't quit, I had to just keep pushing, keep trying. And I ended up being very successful as far as what I scored from marksmanship and basic training. And it just taught me a lesson about persistence and resilience. And it's something that's stuck with me and carried with me ever since then.
That's great. Now, a lot of what you learned during that time is, of course, what you're now sharing from the stage as you go around and speak to youth audiences and travel as a professional speaker. Um, the speaking business is something that most people don't understand, that it's a business that you go around and you have a lot of engagements and it takes a lot of time, and you're on stage for just a few minutes, but the preparation and everything that goes into it is really, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. On top of being a speaker, you're also an author. Which came first? Did you start writing books and then speak about your books, or did you start speaking and then write the books to supplement what you were doing on stage?
Second option. Yeah, I started speaking first
Uh-huh.
and then writing books. I'll be honest, man. And another thing I tell kids is I never, ever picture myself writing a book.
Right.
Never, ever. I mean, I didn't care to write. However, and this is why I tell kids school is important. When I decided to do it, when I figured like, hey, being a speaker, it would help to have a book. When I decided to do it, well, guess what? I had the skill to do it because I paid attention in school and I understood the dynamics and the processes of grammar. And
Hmm.
so I was very capable of doing it. So yeah, the book came second. I started speaking, and I'll be honest, man, I was kicking like a baby. I was like, no, I don't want to write a book. I had people telling me, man, you need to write a book to support you. And I'm like, nah. But then I finally broke down and did it.
Right. And that's great. I know because I'm in a similar boat as a speaker that has books, that it's great to have those books to support you. But what comes first is that foundation. And the foundation comes for you from life experiences and then translating that into something that's relatable to kids. How did you first start getting into speaking? What were the first stages that you got invited to, and how did that kind of grow up for you?
Well, once I left the military, I became a teacher. I
Hmm.
taught for 15 years. And I'll be honestly, I had no idea that I was going to become a speaker most of that time.
Right.
um And I would see, speakers come on campus from time to time. And I remember one time we had one that came, and one of the teachers that was next to me, I guess she was underwhelmed by the speaker.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I was a little underwhelmed too.
Uh-huh.
And she looked at me and she's like, Mills, they gave that guy all that money. They could have got either one of us, to go up there.
Right.
And, it just kind of planted a little seed in my mind, but I agreed with her, but I still was not interested in speaking,
Right.
not at all. Even though I've never been intimidated to speak in front of a group.
Sure.
Well, a few years later, I was just looking to, make some changes. I wanted to do something that's more enjoyable, even though I enjoyed teaching. I started looking at other things, and I eventually started to look at speaking. At first, I was looking at being a teen life coach outside of school.
Hmm.
But then I gravitated more toward, I started paying more attention to speaking. And I'm like, man, I think I could do that. And, I looked at, the money that was involved. And it was like, man, and also the travel. And I was like, man, I would really enjoy this.
Sure.
And so I started gravitating more in that direction. And, I did some things in the community first. I'm big on special education because my oldest daughter has severe autism. And so my first engagements were talking about special education. I've been a special education teacher. And so I talked to court appointed advocates about the special ed system in schools and a couple of other nonprofits. And so that's basically how I transitioned into speaking. Now, the thing was, though, I wanted to also speak on like motivation, social emotional learning, and everything else. But I kind of understood, I could use special education as a way to get, on some stages and get some experience.
Right. That's awesome. Well, and you've been at the speaking game for a while now, and you've kind of developed your signature talks, and we can see from your background that your success talk is one that you share often. Um, I want to dig into the social emotional for a while, just because right now in the middle of COVID and Black Lives Matter, we have a lot of kids at home that are feeling isolated. They're not getting out and playing with their friends like they normally would, and we're seeing increases in anxiety and depression and suicide. That's happening everywhere right now. What's just if you can give me one or two things that we could share with kids as far as, we are stuck at home, but what can we do to make sure that we still have a healthy social emotional outlook on life?
Well, my last book is called You Can Win Being You. And so I'm really big on the fact that no matter what your background is, who you are, what your race is, what your orientation is, that there's a place for you. And so, I would encourage kids right now, and I know it's difficult, but I would encourage them to maybe pull away from the online stuff a little bit because, and I've had to do this even as an adult. There's a lot of news out there right now that can be very, very overwhelming. Yes, you want to stay informed. However, it can really take its toll on you if you're just looking at it nonstop.
Right.
It can lead to that anxiousness. Well, most definitely lead to the anxiousness because I've felt it myself. It can lead to some of that depression. And so, it's where we have to kind of discipline ourselves some. We have to say, you know what, let me put that down. Let me take an hour, 2 hours off of social media. Or even, if you're not even comfortable with that, maybe filter some things out. Maybe block people that are constantly putting bad news, on your news feeds. I think those are just some strategies right there that you can do to kind of help your mental health. In addition, I'm big on the physical, being physical. I'm getting into, being fit because I really believe, you can really start to see a lot of changes in yourself when you work on your physical self. When you start gaining confidence physically, like you see maybe you lost weight or you've gained muscle or, you've increased your stamina, then it has an impact on your mind. You
Right.
know, you start to have more confidence in what you're doing because, success breeds success. You have success in one area, it tends to carry over into other areas. So that's another thing that I would suggest is, yeah, since we are, basically, we can't do as much as we used to, I think it would be great if you dedicate more time to, fitness, because
Right.
that's something that you can do. You don't need a lot of equipment or anything. You could take walks, take runs if you can, do what you can where you can.
Yeah, I appreciate you plugging that. That's actually what I speak about when I go to schools is the impact of exercise and fitness on how we learn and our productivity. And so I'm 100% on board with what you're saying. I know it firsthand from my own life and certainly see that with my kids.
Yeah.
My son
And that,
right now, he's upstairs. Well, not upstairs. He's outside lacquering a bookshelf that he built. And so he's out doing physical labor, and it's great to get away from the screens and to work on some things.
And yeah, I mean, when I first started speaking, I got into running. And really, I didn't get into running. The reason, well, the reason I got into running because I'd seen a lot of my family members struggle with health.
Right.
And so I started walking first. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to run. And then just to kind of even challenge myself some more, I registered for some races like 5K and 10K races. And
Hmm.
um, again, just the confidence of doing that carried over to speaking, because that's when I was really just trying to get my speaking business going. And so,
Right.
it really, did something for my soul, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm really big on that.
So I would guess, I don't know a lot about you, Mills, but I think that running component's an interesting one because when we look at the big things that you've done in life, that you've written books, that that you're on stages constantly sharing your message with people, running and setting that goal to do a 5K or a 10K, that gives you the confidence to do hard things, right? And I think that's an
Yes.
important part of your journey is you can do hard things.
Exactly. Exactly. Being in the army,
Right.
and then, yeah, doing these 5Ks and 10Ks, life is all about mindset and confidence. And, you're going to need some confidence. You're going to need some drive and some persistence to achieve big things. And so those are all things I talk about.
That's great. Now, as you've gone around and talked at different schools and other places, are there one or two moments where you can look to it and say that makes it all worth it? That was one of the great moments in my life, from the stage, or maybe something that happened afterwards. What have been some of your experiences as you've visited with youth?
Man, I have a lot of those experiences because again, I was a teacher for 15 years. And so, a lot of the students now that I work with initially, they're grown. They're
Right.
they're adults, they're in their mid-20s. And um, I know that doesn't really address the speaking component, but I think it kind of relates in the same way
Sure.
because of the fact that, I'll get messages, from time to time, like, hey, Mr. Rodgers, you were one of my favorite teachers. And I'm like, wait, who, me? And, they'll say stuff like, I really liked how you engaged the class. You always really went above and beyond to make school interesting for us. And, things like that are really touching. And, yeah, going out on the road and speaking, and having people come up to me afterwards and talk and say, man, that made a difference for me. And that means a lot. And just the fact that they want to hold a conversation and just, really appreciate what I'm bringing to the table. I mean, it's man, it's almost spine tingling in a way, because I've come a long ways, man. I've had a lot of ups and downs in life. And, to be able to do something I love and have an impact on people is just impressive, and
Mhm.
it's just like such a blessing. And so I can't really say like something super super specific because
Right.
a lot of times when people approach me afterwards or if they message me, it's generally, it's kind of all along the same lines. Like, man, I could really relate to what you were saying. And especially like if I'm speaking on special education, they love me talking about my daughter and the challenges of raising, a kid with special needs. And I think, giving them a voice more than anything, that's really important too, because a lot of times people, tend to be very judgmental and, to kind of put a face on it and to say, when you're a speaker, you're kind of an authority to some degree. And so to
Right.
be able to go out there and share those things that parents of kids with special needs may be thinking about, it means a lot to me. And to get that feedback from them, is to say thank you for saying that. That means a lot.
That's cool. Well, and I
Mhm.
want to take this chance to just point out to those of you who are watching today, students and teachers, what Mr. Rodge just said is important. Those little conversations that have to happen afterwards, where you say thank you and where you point out how that affects your life, that means a lot to us as speakers, having those conversations. And it doesn't have to be this special moment in time. Just those little words of encouragement and thanks really go a long way. So I know that you're making a huge difference, Mr. Rodge, as you go around to different schools and share with students your story and the encouragement that you have. If students want to follow you, or if administrators want to hire you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Best way to get in contact with me is to visit my website. It's successisaprocess.net. Again, successisaprocess.net. Fill out the contact me form that you'll find at the bottom. I have plenty of information on my website. I have plenty of testimonials from principals and program directors. So yeah, that would be the best way to contact me. I'm also on social media at Rodgers Speaks on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show today and for sharing your story with us. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Same here. Thank you for having me.